VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. We've returned after a 4 or 5 day layoff because I was in Miami watching these Vikings go to 5-1. Alas, I am back on Wednesday with my homie Josh Frey. What's going on, man?
I'm good, man. Dustin, I got a little bit of a beef with you this
Yeah,
week.
let's hear it.
I woke up Monday morning after the win. Great win.
Mm-hmm.
15 degrees here in Minnesota, a little bit of snow. I see you post a picture on Twitter, you just chilling on a dock next to the ocean. Like, come on, bro.
Yeah,
I'm
we
just
no, it's all good. On those types, pretty much any trip, I like to have a car. I like to be in control of where I'm going. I don't like relying on taxis and shit. So I found an affordable rental car from like this local Miami outfit. So spontaneously, we decided after the Vikings win on Monday morning to drive down to the Florida Keys because my wife and I wondered, like, will we ever just come down to the Florida Keys? We don't know. So we drove down there. It's about like 3.5 hour drive all the way to like the southernmost point, and that's the picture that made you
yeah, yeah.
jealous. Yep.
That's awesome, dude. Happy for you. Glad it was a good trip.
It was really cool, and I tweeted Captain Obvious shit where that trip was enhanced substantially because they won, and they won like the day after I got there, and then we had 3 more days just to marinate and rub it
Oh yeah.
in. So there was a lot of Vikings fans there. It was wild.
I saw it. Yeah, some of the pictures are crazy. I heard a skull chant over the TV
Oh
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool. And then they're kind of shady, or not shady, the opposite about it. They situate all of the Vikings fans, or they must do something to make the tickets more affordable, because all of the Vikings fans are in constant, incessant sun, so that
Yeah.
it's hot as hell. And yeah, thankfully I got to sit with Brian McKinney, and he's cool enough to have a suite. And so we were in the air conditioned suite, but yeah, it was pretty fantastic. Here's what I want to ask you. I told you before we hopped on air, I want to throw you a little bit of a curveball. It has nothing to do with the 2022 Vikings, but combing through the numbers like I do every week, it's becoming apparent to me that because the Vikings will probably pick from pick 20 to 32 and maybe even F around and pick 32nd, uh, is off ball linebacker the most primary need for this football team with draft time coming up, 5 months away?
Well, shoot, you're kind of already teasing one of my articles for this week now. But no, I was looking through it too, and this is like one of the perfect years for the Vikings to not have a high draft pick. They don't
Yeah.
have any needs on the offensive line. They don't necessarily need a quarterback this draft, and there aren't really any great ones to choose from right now, it looks like. So yeah, I think off-ball linebacker between Trenton Simpson and Clemson, he looks really great right now. Henry Tuo Alabama, he looks awesome. So yeah, I think that would be a great first round pick for the Vikings this year.
And we'll get into the Dolphins, and then I guess I really don't know what else since we have a bye week. So we'll just kind of freestyle here. But coming like 3 weeks ago, 5 weeks, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, you would think perhaps they'd side eye the quarterback class because Cousins is a persistent lightning rod for do we want him or not. And then offensive line, as you said, finally is cultivated, and it's so long as they can afford to pay all these guys in the coming years, it should be set forever. And then edge rusher was the big concern because of injury comebacks. We didn't know if Za'Darius at an old age of 30 was going to be the real deal. Well, he is,
Sure
and he
is.
might be the best free agent signing of the year for anybody. Daniil is finally gaining his footing in a 3-4 defense, and really wasn't a problem in the last 4 weeks. However, he just didn't have his sheer dominance that we're used to. So I would have said a month ago, yeah, edge rusher is probably the most sensible place to go if they're not going to do wide receiver to replace Thielen. But then Patrick Jones looked like a
Right.
maniac in a good way. And it leads me to believe that he's only being held back because Wanham's getting all of his snaps. And I know it was only one game, but Patrick Jones is a second-year player. And so it seems like edge rusher might be okay. You don't need to spend a first, and the Vikings never spend first rounders on edge rushers. And then I today I'm speaking a lot here. My bad.
You're good.
Eric Hendricks, and Jordan Hicks. I think they passed the eye test, but according to PFF, they're like in the 50s. So I think right now, gun to my head, I'd say either a wide receiver to replace an aging Thielen or an off-ball linebacker, because Kendricks is really right now not worth the big money, and Hicks is just kind of good but not great. So is that what we're kind of talking ourselves into here, is wide receiver or off-ball linebacker in round one?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, because yeah, again, like this is a great year for the Vikings not to be in that top 15 because there aren't any great wide receiver prospects this year. There's a
Really.
couple decent ones, obviously,
And
like Jackson
they'll
Smith.
get hyped up too. You know,
Oh yeah, yeah,
they'll get dragged into the top 15.
they'll get hyped up. It's kind of like the past, I think it was this past 2 years ago, where there's not a real great name at the top, but there's some decent depth where the Vikings could potentially get like a wide receiver two caliber player to be behind Jefferson. But yeah, that and then linebacker, like I said, Simpson out of Clemson, he's probably the guy I'm eyeing the most right now. But yeah, this is a great year not to be in the top 15 for sure.
Yes, and so long as we can survive a 2016 collapse, then we won't have a top 15 pick. And even if there was a collapse, it'd probably be like the 15th pick because they've got this segue alert 5-1 cushion that, God, I think my co-host on the McKinney show, Ron Saw, I think he predicted 5-1 when he went through it like 6 weeks ago. So kudos to him. But I didn't see this. I thought we'd be lucky 3-3 because you had to play the Packers and the Eagles and the Saints on the road. And here we are at 5-1. And last week I had that inflection point when you were rattling off 6-1, 7-1 based on how they should play. And it's like it prompted me to tweet that number one question I get right now, and you probably get it too, is are these guys for real? And if they were not, then they would be about 3-3 or maybe 4-2, but they just keep winning.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, it feels like they should run away with this NFC North division with how Green Bay is playing. I know they'll probably get together at some point in like November, December, like they always do. But with the lead that the Vikings have, 3 games basically now because of the tiebreakers, this should be the Vikings division to lose with some of the opponents coming up. Like you said, if they end up rattling off a few wins before that Buffalo game, go into it 7-1, then you basically sealed it right there. If I think like because Green Bay has to play Buffalo yet too. They've got a pretty tough schedule. They got to play the Vikings again. So that doesn't look nearly as easy as it was at the beginning of the season either. So yeah, this should definitely be a playoff team at this point.
And when we looked at the Packers' schedule in the last few weeks, these 2 New York games were supposed to be gimmies, get
Yeah,
right
they were supposed to be
games.
the easy ones.
Yep, finally go to London, and then they're gonna win there, of course. They got to. And then the Jets were the Jets, but they lost to both New York teams, and they're gonna have to pull the numbers. I can't remember their last 3 game skid with Rodgers at quarterback. They're going to lose in Buffalo, like newsflash. I guess it would be very Rodgers-y if they figured out a way to win, but it's they will recover and to the tune of probably 10-7 or something like that. But that's the important takeaway is that I don't think that they're a 13-4 team, nor do I think that Devontae Adams was everything. I think they're just incurring what normal teams do, just a natural blah season, and they're just not used to it because like with Favre did it a couple times. I'll give him that. But Rodgers, it's always upper echelon, and they never, win Super Bowls besides the one, but they're always in the mix. And it just feels like there's something a little bit off about them.
Yeah, just they don't seem to want to run the ball at all this season, which is very weird considering they probably have the best running back duo in the entire NFL with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. It's just ridiculous. I think last week it was 3 rushes in the first quarter, which is just absurd between those two guys. Like you got to run the ball a lot more. And Rodgers just trying to play hero ball. He just doesn't have that in him anymore, I don't think, or at least not this year.
Yeah, I think that this season, he's my age. He's going to be 39 next month. I think this is the type of season that probably sends him to that retirement chatter. Now, I do not know or understand how they're going to navigate that with all the dead cap money. I don't know why they gave him that deal in the first place, but I don't know. Just all the chirps that I hear and just his body language. Now they're 3-3. He might be wondering like, I should have just hung it up.
Yeah, no, if it happened for the past 2 years, and it should be like clearer than it has ever been that he really just doesn't feel like he wants to be there anymore.
Yeah. You take away his main target, which I know that he knew about because for some reason Adams wanted to go play Carr and it's working great, huh?
Yeah.
So they're all melancholy and I love it. But yeah, so the Dolphins part, the single most takeaway, actually, I don't care what you say, was the fact the Vikings got a pass rush. And it was the first time they got some against the Packers week 1. I'll give them that. But this was a Zimmer pass rush. Like, I don't know. And as it should have been, the offensive line for the Dolphins is A, not good, and B was chewed up by injuries. But I was pulling the stats for a couple Vikings territory articles in the past 2 days, and it was Jones, Smith, and Hunter. Everybody feasted.
Yeah, no, without Wanham this week, I thought that was going to be a bit of an issue. But like you said, Patrick Jones, man, he looks like something special. He looked like something special in little glimpses last year, but he never quite got to the QB. Got to him twice this week. And yeah, he looks like he might be the next star on this pass rush.
Yeah, and I'm super excited for that because we need one in the minor leagues, and I say that facetiously, just on the bench behind the meat at the quarterback gang. Because if not, then we're back to where we were 5 minutes ago, thinking about, all right, do they finally draft an edge rusher in the first round? But perhaps with Jones's development and then just the superiority of Smith as a free agent signing. Now that we've seen him do this, that 3-year contract, hopefully he gets incentives out the wazoo. He should stay here until age 32 or 33 or whatever it is, because he looks marvelous and he's like the ultimate dude that you want on your team, is he not?
Oh yeah, he's the perfect locker room guy. Just he's kind of a little bit like Kirk, I think. He's a little goofy. He's a little goofy there, but he just likes to be himself, you know? He's not gonna try to be something that he's not, but he goes out there and he just produces week after week. And he's, like you said, he's probably been the best free agent signing in the entire NFL.
And the Vikings needed that up front in the trenches defensively because Everson Griffin was always that guy. And Danielle Hunter, I think, is self-professed the strong silent type, like Tony Soprano always talked about. And Za'Darius is not. I don't know how they're like best friends because they're different
Need that
dudes.
yin and that yang,
Yeah, and so the important part from the Dolphins game against an underwhelming offensive line is that we know that they can get to the quarterback for, what was it, 4 straight games. It was like, oh God,
yeah,
maybe get a little pass rush in the fourth quarter when the game was on the line. But it really felt like dialing the time machine back to 2018, 2019 with the pass rush. This is not to say the defense was great in Miami. They gave up oodles of yards, 450 or 60 something, but still on brand. They didn't allow very many points. And what did you see? Because you had to be encouraged by the defense on the whole, even though it wasn't perfect. What did you see that made you think like, all right, this defense is trending towards the right direction?
Well, honestly, it's obviously the pass rush, like we talked about, but just the fact that Patrick Peterson continues to have just spectacular games. He had another 3 or 4 pass defenses this week, picked in an interception. Harrison Smith had an interception, also recovered the fumble. So just the fact that some of these guys, these veterans in the secondary, are starting to ramp things up a little bit. It's just opening up things up for the pass rush to get home because there's nobody open all the time. And Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they racked up yards, but they had some trouble getting open on some of these plays just because the defense is playing better. And 2, it's just if they force turnovers, then the offense is going to have more opportunities. It's less opportunities for the opponents to rack up points, and it's just better chance to win the game.
I was sitting next to Wes Johnson. He made the trip with his dad to Miami. And after Joseph missed the extra point, every single Vikings fan was like, oh boy, that's coming back. Usually when we say that, it seemed like they don't, but you have that fear. And then the Dolphins absolutely marched on the following drive. And I was looking at Wes to my right saying, this has the makings of a 17-16 loss. Mm-hmm. And then I kid you not, within 8 minutes, I looked at him and I was like, this thing's over. And it was so strange how it felt like it was in the balance because the offense was playing so piss poor for almost all of the second half, definitely the third quarter. And then they made 2 humongous plays in the fourth quarter. But it was, I think that's just a microcosm of this team. Like I thought, all right, Bridgewater is going to get out of this thing with a 17-16 win. And then like that, they were up 24-10 and like just the Miami fans were just in mass exodus. So it was beautiful. And I can't quite put my finger on when I know a game is safe because I think it was probably that Dalvin Cook hometown touchdown run. But what's the deal with the offense? I don't know that I've seen the Vikings with a Culpepper or Cousins or the good version of Keenum go 4 drives, 3 and out to start a game.
Well, I think it kind of just comes back to that they're having some trouble establishing the run early in games, and we just haven't really seen that out of offense, especially with Dalvin Cook on the roster in the past couple of years. Like they've been able to feast on defenses no matter how good they are on the running game, and that just forces Kirk Cousins to throw more often. He's throwing deeper more often, I think, and it's just that's gonna throw you out of whack a little bit if you have to do that too often. And they finally get it going in the fourth quarter with that huge Dalvin Cook run, like you said. But I think that's just been the big thing for the entire year. They just haven't really gotten it going.
Yeah, and I think it's the sins are masked by the first drive by the
Mm-hmm.
Vikings is usually calculated and proficient, and I think it typically ends in points. And that wasn't there in Miami, and then it was just a
No.
continuation of this blase, like 3-and-out. Like I think I looked up at one point, it was 12 plays for 15 yards. And it was like, oh man, this has got to change. And usually under a Zimmer regime, that meant that game was toast. Nothing was going to get going. It was going to be one of the bad Kirk games. But thankfully, I think towards the end of the second quarter, they got to poop in a group. And then, of course, they had to go to bed in the third quarter because that's mandatory for this
Oh
team.
yeah.
And I'm convinced that that's the only thing separating the Vikings from being a true blue Super Bowl contender. They're obviously a playoff contender now. Is that I don't know why they take a nap in the third quarter. Do you
Well, yeah,
understand it?
even if you look back to that Philly game, if they'd come out at halftime with a touchdown there, that game looks completely different than it does now. If Irv Smith had caught that pass before halftime
Mm-hmm.
and then they come out
Oh
at
God, yeah.
halftime with a touchdown, like they're probably winning that game if they can flip the momentum like that. But yeah, this has been just atrocious at the third quarter coming out of half. 6 total points in the third quarter, 1 point per game. Like it's not great. And yeah, if they get that put together, they can start putting some drives together early in halves. This is a very dangerous team.
One thing before you and I met, even a little bit after, one thing I always said about the Vikings offensive line is somebody in that building has to understand it. It can't just be me. They have to understand that good pass protection equals playoff contention. And right now, that's where I'm at with the third quarter. I'm like, do they see my tweets? Does somebody know that they need to be better in the third quarter? Because it's so glaringly obvious that shit doesn't work for them in the third quarter. It's spearheaded by the offense because they go 3-and-out. The defense has got to come in, suck it up. So it's not like they're getting waxed on defense in the third quarter. 33 points allowed in third quarter is really not criminal. The 6 points is criminal. And I don't know the offense first coach at halftime. There's got to be some sort of thing. It's like, let's go get guaranteed points. If we have to get a field goal, fine. But they're not doing that.
Yeah, no, I do think that part of it, I'd have to look at the numbers again, obviously, because I don't know this off the top of my head. But especially in that Bears game, it felt like Chicago just had the ball forever in the
Mm-hmm.
third quarter of that game. So I do think part of it lies on the defense just simply getting off the field a little bit more often in the second half, and not letting these long drives just wear on for 10 plus plays all the time. But yeah, there's absolutely no reason why this team shouldn't be better in the third quarter on the offensive side of the ball. It's confounding.
And also the same thing that I said about the offensive line until pretty much week 3 of this year is like, just give us average, just give us a third quarter split of like 25-25, because then it'll feel like they're really ticking. But this underwater stuff of 6-33, the point spread in third quarter, when they get to the Bills and the Patriots and the Cowboys, you're going to feel that criminality, because they're not going to be like, all right, we'll let you mosey back in the fourth quarter. No, right now the schedule has become somewhat weak in retrospect because the Packers look like turds, the Saints are pretenders, the Dolphins suddenly don't have a winning record anymore. So when you look back on it, it's like, well, they should be 5-1, damn it. So when they get to the red meat here, it's going to be a little tricky. Here's the next thing I want to ask you. We won't get into Cardinal stuff because we want to see what they do tomorrow night against the Saints, and they're totally embattled. That team, my goodness, Kingsbury's got like a -110 money line to be the first guy fired, and you got to think it's going to happen because they can't get rid of Murray. Kind of like the same thing that's going on with Denver. Like Hackett's going to be the guy to go because you can't throw the towel on Russell Wilson. I digress. So let's talk about some of the bye week stuff. The trade deadline's coming up. I think the internet has created Odell Beckham Jr. rumors, and then one of my I guess I will say I've heard chirps that Kyle Rudolph could be back in the mix to come to the Vikings because he is completely underutilized in Tampa. So let's go into those topics. We'll start with just the idea of a trade. Do you expect this trade merchant, this trade savant, he loves trading, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, do you expect him to make one more deal with diminished draft capital from next year? Because they don't have a 4th, they don't have a 6th or a 7th. So if they're going to trade, they're probably going to have to go into the 2024 piggy bank. What say you about a possible trade, yay or nay?
I do think it's possible. Obviously, you can't count one out with Quasi, like you said. But the one position that I'm really looking at is probably that slot corner spot because
Mm-hmm.
Shannon Sullivan hasn't been great. Slot receivers have gotten the best of the Vikings pretty much all season. So something just to add a little bit of depth there, or even just try him out as a new starter over there would be the position I'm looking at. But yeah, I wouldn't count it out at all. Another guy that I could see maybe some other teams looking at from the Vikings roster would be Chris Reed. Hasn't been active at all for the
Oh
Vikings
yeah.
this year. He's
Good
got
point.
1.5 million cap hit against him this season, so that could free up some money for the Vikings to go make another move. And if you look at Cardinals, Bucks, Rams, there's so many teams out there that
Ah,
need
God,
offensive
that's a
linemen.
wonderful point. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
so
why I like you so much. You broaden my horizons. You got to write about that one. That one is a wonderful idea because yeah, he's too good to do nothing,
yeah.
or at least his resume is too good. We don't really know much about him because he doesn't play. Let's see. On the trade stuff, they would indeed have to dip into a fifth rounder or get into the 2024 satchel of picks. So I don't know. I saw the Bleacher Report one last week that said Michael Davis. You want to get him from the Chargers. And I'm like, well, he's not very good either.
He's got like a $10 million cap hit too. So how do you swing that with the money?
Oh
So
yeah, you
yeah, that
don't.
one didn't make a ton of sense for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't even look at that. But that's even more of a cake topper than me just pulling his PFF going like, okay, like it's like we have Michael Davis at home and his name's Chandon Sullivan.
I will say that I think he was better in the past couple of years. They just got JC Jackson this year
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
over in LA. So he hasn't been able to play much. And when he has, it's just been bad. So
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so a change of scenery could indeed do the trick. On this OBJ stuff, I have a lot of Vikings friends asking me about it. They're gonna get him, and the first thing I always say is like, with what money? Like they're gonna have to restructure Cook or Kendricks because they don't have money, and I don't think OBJ is coming for 800K. So while it'd be fun, like just for vibes, just for jersey sales, of course. I don't know anybody that's like, yeah, we don't want that guy. You would love it because he would, that will have meant that he picked the purple team as the one he thinks is gonna win a Super Bowl. But on the realism and the fascination, what say you about OBJ and the Vikings?
Well, like you said, for vibes, then sure, that's great. LSU connection between him and Justin Jefferson, that'd be awesome. But money's not going to work. There's no way he's going to do that, especially if the Vikings don't make another trade to free up some cap space or restructure a contract. And then just touches, like even if you were able to free up that money, it just doesn't feel like it'd be worth it between Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Irv Smith as he starts getting things together here. That's four guys that are probably ahead of him in terms of target share. So even if you did make the money work, I don't think that's worth it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of like, how I don't know how closely you started to follow in the Vikings or when you started doing it, I should say. But every year when Larry Fitzgerald was about 32, 33, it was always like, yeah, bring him to the Vikes. It's the same thing. It'd be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how worthwhile it would be. But to your point, I'll point this out probably for the umpteenth time, is that if you want Odell Beckham on the Vikings, that's fine and dandy. But then you must sacrifice targets from Justin Jefferson, you as the fan, because they're using him in that Cooper Kupp role, like we teased all summer. That means the targets are there. And this is why Adam Thielen isn't getting his normal, like Diggs Thielen split, like where they're just mano y mano, because Jefferson now is better. And if you're going to have the Cooper Kupp role, you have to pay the piper somewhere. Adding Beckham to the mix would either ixnay Thielen to make him just this third down receiver, or OBJ comes and doesn't really get targets, and that doesn't sound like a fun recipe for anything.
I don't see it at all. I don't see it. I think he's going to end up choosing the Rams just because one, they could probably pay him, and two, they have a way bigger need at wide receiver than the Vikings do, so they'll be willing to shed that money for him.
Yeah, and they got the incumbent advantage. It's
right.
like the president running for re-election. Like he was there before, and that's, I think, why OBJ will probably end up there. However, if they drop too far, are they 3-3?
3-3, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So they'll figure it out. They'll probably sneak into the postseason, but that's another team that doesn't really scare me right now because they just don't look that good. All right, we'll end on the Rudolph thing. So I have it on good authority that the Vikings have talked to him, maybe not necessarily Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but one of the lieutenants in the front office who has that pre-existing relationship. Now, I know that won't set your world on fire, Rudolph coming back, but do you think that at least as a red zone target or something happens to Irv, would it give you more inspiration to have Rudolph over Munt? Because it seems like everybody's Munt's takes have just fallen by the wayside.
I I mean, I don't think Munt's necessarily a great player,
Mm-hmm.
but is Kyle Rudolph a great player at this point in his career either? Like, I feel like there's a reason he's not getting a ton of snaps on the Bucks offense, even without Gronkowski there anymore. Like, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just aged himself out of the league a little bit. And we saw last year with the Giants, even he didn't play nearly as well as we're used to seeing Kyle Rudolph play. So I don't necessarily think that's going to do a ton for the Vikings offense either if they brought him in.
Okay. Yeah, I think not that I share this belief, but if he were to come back, the idea from fans who've watched this team since, his infancy as an NFLer is that he'd instantly be back and as good as the 2016 guy who was targeted 132 times that season. And that's just not going to happen. However,
Yeah.
because you have dual fandom, or at least you did with the Saints and Vikings, you remember vividly what the man is capable of in the red
Oh yeah.
zone.
Oh yeah.
So it would be one of those things where you sign him back. He's probably going to make a clutch catch when it matters. And, is it worth it for him he probably would be on a vet minimum deal. I'd be open to it because I love the dude. And we don't really have, monsters of rock tight ends because Irv Smith has, I think, proven that he's just a tight end and not Darren Waller. And then the other guys, like nobody knows besides dudes who have podcasts about the Vikings.
Yeah, I'd be definitely more on board with this than I would OBJ, just because one, that's a great storyline. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
he's going to demand a ton of targets like OBJ would either.
No.
Yeah. So like if you want to bring him in just to say, hey, you can retire as a Viking this year, I think that's a great storyline. That's something that I'd be totally down with. Like that'd be really cool to see. And like you said, he probably would end up coming in and making that red zone offense a little bit better. And Vikings definitely need to be better in the red zone moving forward
And
down
they're
this stretch.
getting better.
They
After
are
that
getting better.
that
They are
Bears
getting
game, they
better.
were 4 for 4, and I think against the Dolphins they were 2 for 3. So they were down, I think, at 28th in the league, and now they're up to like 13th or 14th. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the third down conversion percentage that skyrocketed after the Bears game and then came back to earth against the Dolphins because, of course, it was miserable. The thing about Rudolph, if indeed there's any smoke to this fire, is that his best asset as a football player is his hands. And
Mm-hmm.
usually, if that is your dance, then you can stay in the league till age 35 or so. Tom Brady made dudes relevant because they had hands until, age blah, blah, blah. All right. Do you have any final take on the Vikings bye week? Because we'll probably rehash all of the bye week stuff next week and preview the Cardinals. What's your closing argument for me, sir?
Well, if you're reading over on purpleptsd.com, be ready for a lot of draft content this week because I'm going to be doing a lot of draft stuff with no football going on in Minnesota for a couple days here. So yeah, that's about it.
Well, that's the most unquenchable appetite that there is in NFL content space is draft talk. And so I don't think you'll have a problem getting eyeballs to read your stuff, good sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll be back Wednesday. We will be chatting about the first place Vikings. We will be chatting about the 5-1 Vikings, and then we'll have to do an autopsy on what happened to the Cardinals against the Saints. Outside of a 51-0 win, I don't think we'll be too spooked about the upcoming game. But there's also that fear that maybe it's the game that they turn it around because
I
Hopkins
will
is back.
say they get DeAndre Hopkins back this week. That can change some things.
Yeah, it will, but they also lost Marquise. So it's like how quickly, or wait,
Yeah.
so Marquise wasn't season ending, but it's probably going to have him
It's
shelf for a little
6 weeks. It's like
bit.
4 to 6 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, then we'll get into Cardinals talk next week and then see what comes of this bye week in terms of transactions. All right, sir.
Sounds great to me.
All right. Skull, baby.